1:53 a.m. Andersen Air Force Base, Guam, the northwestern tip of the island, 13 degrees north of the equator, the Pacific stretching in every direction to every horizon. The night sky above the flight line absolutely clear and blazing with stars. The temperature still at 81 degrees 3 hours before dawn. The warm tropical air carrying the faint salt smell of the Philippine Sea from the west and the Pacific from the east. The flight line was partially active. 2 B-52H Stratofortresses from the 20th Bomb Squadron were completing post-mission maintenance after a long-range training flight, their ground crews moving efficiently under the floodlights of the hardened aircraft shelters. In the operations building, the duty officer was managing a routine overnight watch. The tower was handling a single inbound C-17 from Hickam. Andersen Air Force Base was in the strategic calculus of Pacific Command, the anchor of American power projection across the western Pacific. Its runways, 2 parallel strips, each 3,000 meters, capable of handling any aircraft in the American inventory, had been launching B-52s, B-2s, and B-1Bs on long-range bomber missions across the Pacific for 6 decades. Its fuel storage, more than 100 million gallons of JP-8. Its pre-positioned munitions, classified, but assessed by any competent adversary analysis as representing a substantial fraction of Pacific Air Force's ready strike inventory. It was not simply a base. It was the logistics foundation on which any sustained air campaign in the Western Pacific depended, which was precisely why it was the target. At 1:53 a.m., 24 People's Liberation Army Air Force H-6K strategic bombers crossed their launch line at a range of approximately 1,500 kilometers northwest of Guam. They had been airborne for 3 hours and 40 minutes, flying a carefully planned approach profile that kept them beyond the nominal range of Andersen's defensive systems for the duration of their transit. At the launch line, each H-6K released its weapons, 2 CJ-20 air-launched cruise missiles per aircraft, 48 CJ-20S total, subsonic, terrain-following, each carrying a 500-kilogram warhead, each with a range of more than 2,000 kilometers from the release point and a circular error probable of less than 10 meters. Using GPS-aided inertial navigation, plus terminal FLIR guidance, the target set was comprehensive. The CJ-20S had been assigned to 24 discrete aim points across Andersen's footprint. The 2 primary runway surfaces and their intersection points, the fuel storage tank farm, the pre-positioned munitions storage complex, the base operations building and air traffic control tower, the communications infrastructure, the POL distribution network, the aircraft shelter complexes, and the base's 2 main electrical substations. The strike was designed not to produce casualties, a calculated choice by the Central Military Commission, which had assessed that American personnel casualties on Guam would produce a political response of a different magnitude than infrastructure destruction, but to render Andersen operationally inoperable for a minimum of 90 days, removing the Western Pacific's most capable forward air base from the strategic equation for the duration of whatever operation the PLA's next move would require. In Beijing, the Central Military Commission had authorized the strike 60 hours earlier. The strategic logic was layered and, in the CMC's assessment, precise. Andersen Air Force Base was the one asset in the Pacific whose degradation would most constrain American operational options in the Western Pacific. Without Andersen, the B-52 and B-21 missions that were the backbone of any extended air campaign against PLA targets would face dramatically extended flight times and reduced sortie rates. Without Andersen's fuel infrastructure, the forward sustainment of carrier air wings and land-based air power in the Western Pacific would require a logistical reorganization measured in weeks. The CJ-20's combination of range, precision, and cruise missile survivability, its small radar cross-section at low altitude, its terrain-following profile, its approach from multiple vectors, was specifically designed to saturate terminal defense systems. The CMC had calculated that 48 CJ-20 cruise missiles approaching from multiple vectors simultaneously would exceed the engagement capacity of any single terminal defense battery. Andersen's acknowledged air defense included a THAAD battery at Andersen and Patriot Pass, 3 batteries distributed across the island, against 48 subsonic cruise missiles on terrain-following profiles approaching from the northwest. The THAAD battery was irrelevant. THAAD was designed for ballistic missiles, not cruise missiles at low altitude. The PAC-3 batteries could engage subsonic cruise missiles, but their engagement geometry against simultaneous multi-vector approaches would be stressed beyond their capacity to achieve full intercept coverage. The math, as the CMC had calculated it, was on China's side. They had made 6 catastrophic mistakes. The first mistake: the 24 H-6K bombers had been tracked from the moment they taxied at Dachang Air Base in Jiangsu Province, 4 hours before they reached their launch line. The RC-135 that had been conducting signals intelligence collection off the Chinese coast had detected the unusual H-6K sortie activity at 10 p.m. local time. The E-3G Sentry AWACS that was permanently orbiting over the western Pacific in the Guam defensive surveillance zone had continuous radar track on the formation from the time it was 200 miles from the Chinese coast, climbing through its cruise altitude. By the time the H-6Ks reached their launch line at 1:53 a.m., Pacific Air Forces had been tracking them for 3 hours and 15 minutes, had assessed the launch line at high confidence 40 minutes before the aircraft reached it, and had elevated Andersen's force protection condition to Delta at 1:30 a.m., 23 minutes before the first CJ-20 left its pylon. The second mistake: Andersen's air defense architecture in the CMC's assessment was the acknowledged, unclassified order of battle: THAAD against ballistic missiles, PAC-3 against theater-level threats. It was not the full picture. 14 months earlier, following an updated Pacific Air Force's vulnerability assessment of Guam against a cruise missile saturation scenario, a classified complement to the island's terminal defense had been installed. 2 batteries of the Army's counter-rocket, artillery, and mortar system, enhanced for cruise missile defense, the CRAM-CM, positioned on the western approaches to Andersen's runway complex, backed by a distributed network of AN/TPY-4 mobile surveillance radars that extended low-altitude radar coverage to the northwest at altitudes between 50 and 500 feet, specifically to detect terrain-following cruise missile profiles. The CRAM-CM batteries had engagement capacity against small, subsonic, low-altitude targets, exactly the CJ-20's terminal profile, that the PAC-3 engagement geometry in a multi-vector scenario could not provide. The CMC's targeting analysts had not known these systems were in place. The third mistake: the 48 CJ-20s were following GPS-aided navigation in their terminal phase. The same GPS navigation environment that the 94th Electronic Warfare Squadron's ground-based position spoofing system at Andersen had been corrupting since 1:40 a.m., 13 minutes before the first missile launched. The spoofing system, the same class of capability that had been deployed in the Strait of Hormuz and the Taiwan Strait scenarios, was injecting false position corrections into the GPS signal environment over Andersen's airspace, displacing the CJ-20's GPS-derived position estimates by between 80 and 140 meters from their actual positions in the terminal guidance phase, against aim points that required sub-10-meter accuracy to achieve the desired runway, cratering and infrastructure penetration effects. A terminal guidance error of 80 to 140 meters transformed a precision strike into a near-miss strike. A CJ-20 aimed at the center of a runway intersection that impacts 100 meters from the intersection does not crater the intersection. It craters the taxiway. The runway stays open. The fourth mistake: the CJ-20 SFLIR terminal guidance, the backup seeker that was designed to acquire the target's thermal signature in the final kilometers, regardless of GPS accuracy, was operating in a thermal environment that the base's defensive planning had anticipated. Every high-value aim point on Andersen's critical infrastructure had been covered with thermal screening materials in the 23 minutes between force protection condition, Delta, and the missile's arrival. The fuel storage tank farm, the highest value thermal target, had its exterior surfaces covered by the base's emergency thermal masking equipment, reducing its radar and infrared signature to below the CJ-20's terminal seeker acquisition threshold. The runway surfaces had been partially flooded with fire suppression foam, reducing their thermal contrast with the surrounding terrain. The FLIR seekers would be looking for high-contrast thermal signatures that were no longer present at the levels their target selection algorithms required. The fifth mistake. The CMC's strike design assumed that all 48 CJ-20s would navigate their approach profiles without interference. Between their release point and Andersen, the CJ-20S flew a 1,500-kilometer course through airspace that contained two assets. The CMC's mission planning had not fully integrated. The first, 12 F-22A Raptors from the 19th Fighter Squadron at Andersen that had launched at 1:33 a.m., 20 minutes before the H-6K launch line, and were positioned in a combat air patrol barrier 1,000 kilometers northwest of Guam, between the H-6Ks and their targets. The F-22s carried AIM-120D and AIM-9X missiles with engagement authority against any PLAAF platform in the identified threat corridor. The H-6Ks, having released their weapons and turned back toward Dachang, were not the F-22's primary target. The CJ-20S were. The F-22's APG-77 radar in cruise missile tracking mode, operating in a specific low probability of intercept waveform designed to prevent the CJ-20's radar warning receivers from detecting the illumination, acquired the leading edge of the incoming CJ-20 formation at a range of 212 miles. AIM-120D engagement range against a subsonic non-maneuvering cruise missile exceeds 100 miles. The F-22s engaged the first wave of CJ-20s from beyond their own radar warning receiver activation range. The sixth mistake, the one that made the entire strategic concept of runway neutralization collapse, was a compound failure of the CMC's aim point selection logic. Of the 24 aim points assigned to the 48 CJ-20S, only 4 were aimed at the runway surfaces themselves. The remaining 20 aim points were assigned to support infrastructure, fuel, munitions, communications, power. The CMC's operational concept was that destroying the support infrastructure would make the runways operationally irrelevant, even if the runway surfaces themselves survived. What that concept did not account for was that Pacific Air Forces had, following the previous year's vulnerability review, pre-positioned a mobile forward operating base package at Andersen, fuel trucks, mobile munitions handling equipment, mobile power generation, and mobile communications, specifically designed to sustain flight operations from Andersen's runways for a minimum of 72 hours using only organic mobile assets, without any of the permanent fixed infrastructure. Even if the fuel farm, munitions complex, and power substations had all been hit, which they were not because of GPS spoofing and thermal masking, the runway complex would have remained operational. The CMC had aimed at the infrastructure that Pacific Air Forces had designed to be bypassed. What happened in the next 31 minutes removed every dimension of the PLA strike from the equation simultaneously. At 2:04 a.m., 11 minutes after the H-6Ks released their weapons, the F-22 barrier patrol engaged the leading CJ-20 wave. 12 F-22s, each carrying 6 AIM-120Ds and 2 AIM-9Xs in a barrier engagement that swept the incoming cruise missile formation from northwest to southeast. Against subsonic, non-maneuvering targets with radar cross-sections smaller than a fighter aircraft, but substantially larger than Zero, the AIM-120D achieved its design performance against the CJ-20 profile. The F-22s conducted 3 engagement passes over 22 minutes. The barrier position, allowing each aircraft to engage, brake for reload positioning, and re-engage from a new azimuth. 31 CJ-20S were removed from the battle space in the barrier engagement, 17 in the first pass, 9 in the second, 5 in the third. 17 CJ-20S survived the F-22 barrier and continued toward Andersen. At ranges between 40 and 80 miles from the base, the PACAC-3 MESE batteries engaged the surviving formation. The Jaden networked engagement management system across Andersen's 4 PAX-3 batteries assigned 2 interceptors per track, 34 interceptors against 17 tracks, in a sequenced engagement that prioritized the missiles on the shortest time to impact tracks. 11 of the 17 survivors were intercepted by PAC-3 MSE between 80 and 22 miles from the base. 6 CJ-20S reached the CRAM CM engagement zone at ranges between 15 and 4 miles from Andersen's western perimeter. The CRAM CM's engagement radar acquired all 6 at 15 miles. The system's engagement cannon, a naval phalanx variant reconfigured for land-based cruise missile defense, engaged 4 of the 6 in the 2 to 6 mile engagement bracket. 4 intercepted. 2 CJ-20S reached Andersen's airspace. Of the 2 that arrived, the first impacted on a taxiway on the western side of the primary runway complex, 107 meters from the runway centerline. The GPS spoofing had displaced its aim point sufficiently to miss the runway surface. The cratered taxiway could be repaired in 6 hours. The second CJ-20's FLIR seeker failed to acquire its designated aim point, the thermally masked fuel storage tank farm, and defaulted to its pre-programmed GPS impact point, which the spoofing had displaced onto the perimeter road east of the tank farm. The warhead detonated on the perimeter road. No fuel storage was damaged. No runway was damaged. Andersen Air Force Base had absorbed a 48 missile strike and sustained 2 impacts, both on non-critical surfaces, both repairable within hours. The F-22s, having executed their barrier engagement and recovered to their combat orbit, had been receiving the execute order for the counterattack package since 2:16 a.m. The 24 H-6K bombers that had launched the strike were on their return flight to Dachang, northbound, climbing to cruise altitude, their mission complete in every dimension except the one that mattered. They were no longer protected by their launch separation from Andersen's defenses. They were in a known position on a known return heading, and the F-22s were faster. The F-22s turned northwest at 2:19 a.m. on intercept vectors for the withdrawing H-6K formation, their APG-77 radars sweeping for the bomber formation's radar returns at ranges beyond 300 miles. The H-6K is a subsonic bomber with a radar cross-section orders of magnitude larger than a cruise missile. At 240 miles, the lead F-22's radar acquired the formation. The H-6K crews had no awareness of the F-22S until the AIM-120D seeker heads activated at ranges between 30 and 50 miles, ranges at which a supersonic missile closing at Mach 4 leaves a reaction window measurable in seconds. The F-22 element executed a coordinated engagement sweep from southwest to northeast across the H-6K formation's return track, releasing AIM-120Ds in a sequenced pattern designed to arrive at multiple aircraft simultaneously and prevent the formation from maneuvering into mutual support geometry. 20 of the 24 H-6K bombers were removed from the battlespace in the F-22 engagement. The remaining 4 broke to the northwest in individual defensive maneuvers, dispensing chaff and flares and activating their active jamming systems. 2 were re-engaged by F-22s on pursuit vectors and removed from the battlespace. 2 reached the edge of the F-22's fuel margin and broke off pursuit. Both continued northwest and were tracked by the E-3G to their return to Chinese airspace. Their identification data logged and transmitted to Pacific Air Force's intelligence for the damage assessment record. At 2:47 a.m., the B-21 Raider element that had been pre-positioned at Andersen and had launched at 1:45 a.m., 8 minutes before the H-6Ks reached their launch line, was outbound northwest toward its assigned targets. 2 B-21s, each carrying 8 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator bombs and a complement of JASSMER cruise missiles on strike profiles against the PLAAF infrastructure that had generated the strike. Dachang Air Base in Jiangsu Province, from which the 24 H-6Ks had launched, received 16 JASSMER cruise missiles At 4:11 a.m. in a time-on-target strike against the H-6K maintenance facilities, the weapons storage complex housing the CJ-20 reserve inventory, and the aircraft shelters housing the H-6K fleet's remaining airframes. The maintenance facilities and weapons storage complex sustained direct impacts and structural collapse. 8 of the aircraft shelters received GBU-57 penetrating strikes that collapsed the hardened overhead protection and rendered the shelters and their contents permanently inoperable. Leiyang Air Base in Hunan Province, the PLAAF's primary H-6K operational conversion and reserve storage facility for the Southeastern Theater, received 12 JASSMERs at 4:29 a.m. against its fuel and weapons infrastructure and 4 GBU-57s against its hardened maintenance complex. The operational conversion training infrastructure was assessed as permanently inoperable. The weapons storage bunkers received direct penetrating strikes. By 5 a.m., 3 hours and 7 minutes after the first CJ-20 left its H-6K pylon, the full response was complete. The final accounting was comprehensive and documented by Pacific Air Forces over the subsequent 48 hours. CJ-20 cruise missiles launched. 48. Removed from the battlespace by F-22 barrier engagement. 31. Intercepted by PAC-3MSE-11. Intercepted by CRAM. CM-4. Impacting Andersen Air Force Base. 2. Both on non-critical surfaces. 0 damage to runways, 0 damage to fuel infrastructure, 0 damage to munitions complex. Andersen Air Force Base operational status following the strike. Fully operational, 0 flight operations delayed. H-6K bombers involved in the strike. 24. Removed from the battle space by F-22 engagement. 22. Returned to Chinese airspace. 2. Identified and tracked. PLAAF H-6K operational force in the Southeastern Theater after the engagement and the Dachang and Leiyang infrastructure strikes. Degraded by an interval assessed at between 14 and 22 months to restore equivalent force. Andersen personnel having sustained any injury. 1 airman received a minor laceration from debris associated with the taxiway impact. Treated at the base medical clinic. Returned to duty. American aircraft lost 0. All 12 F-22s recovered at Andersen by 6 a.m. Both B-21s recovered by 8:30 a.m. The taxiway damaged by the single non-intercepted impact was repaired and returned to service by 9 a.m. The B-52H maintenance crews who had been working on the flight line at 1:53 a.m., sheltered in the hardened maintenance facilities during the engagement, resumed their post-mission checks at 6:30 a.m. The C-17 that had been on inbound approach at the time of the strike had diverted to Kadena and recovered there. It landed at Andersen at 7 a.m. At 10 a.m., a B-21 Raider launched from Andersen on a scheduled long-range training mission over the Central Pacific. It was the first aircraft of the day's flight schedule. The schedule was not modified. The sortie rate was not reduced. In Beijing, the Central Military Commission convened at 8 a.m. The 48 CJ-20 strike that had been designed to render Andersen inoperable for 90 days had rendered a taxiway inoperable for 7 hours. The 22 H-6K bombers that had delivered the strike, each representing approximately $360 million in platform cost and decades of crew training, had been removed from the battle space on their return flight by the aircraft that had been between them and their target since before they released their weapons. The infrastructure strikes on Dachang and Leiyang had removed the PLAAF Southeastern Theater H-6K operational capacity for the better part of 2 years. Andersen Air Force Base was operating. Its runways were intact. Its fuel was intact. Its B-21s were flying. This is what happens when you calculate that 48 cruise missiles will overwhelm a defense architecture your intelligence picture had not updated to include 2 classified systems installed 14 months earlier. This is what happens when your GPS-guided precision strike arrives in an airspace that was being actively spoofed 23 minutes before your aircraft reached their launch line. And your thermal backup looks for signatures that were masked before your missiles entered terminal phase. Andersen is open. The B-21 is airborne. It always will be.